This is a session about the release lifecycle. What we see here is the Kanban view of the release lifecycle that we have defined in this database. We see the statuses that a release can reside in. Some of these statuses will be reached by transitioning manual release to it. Others will get these release automatically transitioned to them. The manual transitioning is most of the time happening at the beginning of the life cycle. So with the scope definition and in scheduling state, it will be a release manager that will take care of that. But from there on, there will be automated transitioning. A release will go in a status like in dev or in QA when the first of the change sets that will hold the changes goes into that state. And the release will get in a ready for QA, ready for deployment state once all of the change sets that are related to it get into the state ready for QA, ready for deployment. When all the change sets get, for instance, in a ready for deployment state, the release will kick off an approval process, and once all approvals are given, the release will automatically get transitioned to the ready for deployment state and scheduled for deployment in the production environment. The goal of this session is to have a closer look to every state that is part of that release lifecycle. So the first one is our in scope definition. So looking at the releases that we currently have, I have here a release that is assigned to me for the June 2016 time period. So when I open this release, I can see there is only like a container defined with a short name and a description and a title. So I can start working on that release and say, well, I will start with that release and I will do the scope definition of that release. So my release goes into scope definition, and I will add that this release is going to take the banking app and changes for the mainframe app to the production environment. And this release is part of a program or a portfolio that has to do with the health insurance portfolio. Further down, I can relate this release to projects, to change requests. So I will relate this release to the projects, let's say banking app 5.0 and the mainframe app 12.0, and I can select the change requests that will go with that release to the production environment. These change requests have gone through an approval process, and these change requests can come from external sources as well as from internal Clarive topics that are change requests derived from the Clarive topics incident and problem. So in this case, when I'm looking at the topics change request, it's the ready for scheduling ones that are approved by the change and advisory report. So we have gone through that, and all those that are ready for scheduling are candidates to participate in a release. Looking at this particular one for the mainframe app, we will see that there is a number for the ServiceNow change request included, which means that this change request was replicated from outside of Clarive. It was coming from ServiceNow. It has been replicated just by creating the change request in ServiceNow. We have replicated data into a change request in Clarive, and it will go through our lifecycle. In ServiceNow, you can see here the change request that is related. It's the change request 30,051. Looking here, that's the number that we see. For the release, so for these change requests and the release that we are currently building, the change requests that we can relate have to be ready for scheduling, and you've seen that we have 3 of them, so we will relate these 3 to our release. And so now when we save this, what we have done is we have defined, in fact, the content of our release. It will have the changes for the mainframe, the banking web, related to the projects that are banking web 5.0, mainframe app 12.0, and the change request that will go with that release are these ones that are currently in the ready for scheduling status. When we have defined our content, we will move on and we'll say, well, this release now is going to the ready for scheduling status. Is going for the ready for scheduling status, which means that we will add timing details about the environments and when we would like this release to go into production. So going to our release in scheduling, for instance, let's say this one, we have this release that is in scheduling, and what we have here is the projects that we had and the change requests that we have added to that release. But we also have already part of an environment plan, so we have the development, the test, the QA with the slots that we have requested. This was built by making environment requests to owners. These owners of these environments, they either approve or reject my request. So when I look here at further down, I will see my requests that I made, see the ones that were approved, the ones that were rejected, and the one that I don't have a reply to yet because it is signed. So looking at this one, suppose that I am an environment owner and I'm looking at this request and I look at the environment, it's a pre-production environment, and I look at the dates, I can say, well, I approve that. And once this is approved, when I go back to my release and I can here refresh my view, you will see that now the pre-production environment has been added. So I have now in the scope of my release, I have the content of my release, and now I have the time slots and the planning of my release. When I go further down to the release dashboard, I can already see that in the calendar form that my calendar has been adapted with development, with test, with QA, with pre-production. I can see that for that release the timing details have been entered and that my scheduling is finished. So I can go on to the next step, which will be the ready for development step. So I have done my my scheduling, I have done my scope, and I will go to the ready for development stage. So just by transitioning this release to the ready for development state, I'm automatically changing the status of the projects and the change requests that have been related to that release to the ready for development state.